everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's Irene and I hope you're all doing well. Today's video is all about my list of sewing essentials, stuff and tools that you would need to have from the get-go in your sewing kits. So the first things that you would get, the priority items. And I hope that you enjoy this video. Let's go. So the number one thing you would need is a good pair of scissors or a good quality cutter, roller blade cutter, I guess. These come in a universal size and you can change the blade easily, which you should be doing quite often. And they're actually really practical and they're my favorites, because I really like to be precise and I don't like having to sort of lift up the fabric with the scissors in order to cut. But the scissors do come in handy in certain situations as well, so I like to have both. And even if you're on a budget, cutting thing, like scissors and blades are the one thing that you should actually not cheap out on, because they are really important. It's really important to have something that cuts really well, and you should only use these on your fabrics and not give it away to others. Like, don't open a pack of candies with it or cut a paper with it or anything, because these are only for sewing. That's rule number one of sewing. So yeah, for those of you who prefer to have roller cutters, you would also need a cutting mat. So it's something that you use to cut on. You put your fabric on it and then you sort of cut on this so that you don't damage whatever is underneath your fabric, like your table, your floor, whatever. These come in different sizes. This is the small one that I have, and it has some markings on it to indicate, the angles and the centimeters and stuff like that. I have also a bigger one, which is very useful when I'm cutting like a large piece of pattern, sewing pattern. And yeah, this is my preferred method of cutting, like I said, because it's more precise and quicker in my opinion. So next is again about scissors. These are good quality and sharp embroidery scissors, as you can see. And again, you use these only for sewing. You don't give it away to people and you don't cut anything else. This is mainly used for, like, those little details. I use them sometimes when I'm clipping or to cut the thread when I finish sewing. And they're absolutely essential in my opinion. And I have two because they're small, so I sometimes take them to my ironing board or something and I leave them there, and there is another one on my desk, so I don't have to get up and go back there. And also one of them is pointy and this one is actually sharper to cut with, so they sort of complete each other. So the next one is not necessarily an essential. It is pinking shears. These are a very vintagey method of finishing your seams. It's some sort of like zigzag scissors. So when you cut them like that, it prevents fraying because of the angle, I guess. And I really love this technique. I usually use it for garments that are gonna be hand washed or like dry cleaned or something. And I also love using it inside like facings. Like for example, this shirt has a facing and in between there's the seam, and I ended up pinking it because even though a lot of people also like just leaving it like that, I prefer to pink it because not only does it look better, but it gives me a bit of peace of mind. And it just feels so much better to wear that garment. So next is pins and pin holders. So when it comes to pins, I like to have different lengths, and I try to make sure that I buy sharp ones that don't bend, but other than that, you really don't need to spend a whole lot of money for like glass heads or whatever. Just any other ones will do. So I have some super long ones which I actually use the most. I believe there are longer ones than this out there, but this is like long enough for my projects. And I have some really small ones and then some middle-sized ones. I really think that you should get like different sizes for that reason. And I also have a magnetic pin holder which prevents things from falling everywhere, as well as, you know, when you're quickly sewing and you're taking off the pins and you want to just like not even look at where you're putting it, you need something flat like this to place it so that you can focus on your sewing. But in the beginning I didn't have this. I actually had a pin cushion like this one. It's just a little sponge where you sort of put your needles. And this, like I said, because I want to sort of just throw it, I didn't really like using it for the pins that I'm sewing with. But I still do use it. What I use it for is when I change my machine needles and that needle is still usable, I just put it in here. And I also have like this very large hole needle so that I can use it for the tails of my serger stitches. And so everything has a use. So next is hand sewing needles. Like a good range of good quality hand sewing needles is a great thing to have, because you're not only going to use your machine for sewing, you're surely going to need to do some hand sewing, and it's great to have like a range of different ones, because when you're using a very dainty little fabric you need a thinner one, but when you're using a thick fabric you need like a bigger needle. And it's honestly like one of the basics of a sewing kit. So while we're on the topic of hand sewing needles, another basic essential of any sewing kit is a thimble. So thimbles are little finger hats that you put on your middle finger so that you can sew faster. It helps you push the needle without hurting your finger so that you get way faster at hand sewing. And it also protects your finger from sharp objects, which is always a risk when you're hand sewing and like sewing in general. But it definitely is something that takes a little bit of getting used to. I am at this moment in time not the best at using thimbles, admittedly, but I really want to become a pro at this, because every great sewist knows how to use a thimble and they use thimbles like a pro. So that's my goal. So the next item is everyone's worst nightmare. You guessed it, it's the unpicker. Unpickers are essential because we all make mistakes. Sewing is literally 70% mistakes and going back and undoing and restarting. Even for the best of us, even for the best sewists, it's an essential. We all make mistakes while sewing. It's just the nature of sewing. So next is the typical accessory of every sewist out there, except me, because mine is a bear that comes back inside. Mine is super cool. It's a measuring tape, and when you push the nose, look what happens. It's so cool, right? And it's also great because my bird Lilo, which keeps screaming now, loves to chew these. So I had one actually that, you know, that didn't have this and that I would put around my neck, and it was destroyed in such a short time, you have no idea. And so I ended up buying one like this. It's super practical and perfect for what I need, and this is absolutely an essential. Like, this is, without this you can't sew, because the most important step of sewing is arguably, or inarguably actually, grain line. Checking the grain line, making sure it's perfect, and for that you need a measuring tape. And I mean, you need to measure stuff. It's all about, sewing is all about measuring stuff, so measuring tape. So on the topic of measurements, we also need to have rulers, different types, in our sewing kits, because this is what sewing is about, especially when you're doing like alterations, or you know, you're trying to make sure that your seam allowance is correct or whatever. You will of course need rulers. Me, I have a short one like this, a longer one. It's just a children's you know, ruler. And then I also have a huge one that came with my cutting boards, but you can also have them on their own, I guess. I believe they're called Japanese rulers, but I'm not exactly sure. These are useful not only because they're huge and like it has like corners and stuff, because also it has 45-degree angle markings, which if you're going to be making bias tape, then you're going to need that. Or you can use also a triangular ruler for that as well, which I don't have. So the next essential is a marking item, so such as a fabric marker, a transfer sheet, or charcoal like this. These are probably the most classically used ones. You can choose whatever you want, but remember to check before you use it on your fabric. Put some on your fabric, like on a piece of scrap of the same fabric, and try to wash it out and see if it really goes away, and try to use it only obviously on the wrong side, and make sure you don't like make really dark pressured marks on it. Make sure it's in invisible areas, and don't use like black on top of white or something. Try to go for a color that is close enough, and you will be good. Next is an essential one, thread. So you can buy different types of thread, but the most popular one is like Gutterman polyester ones, and they come in sets of basic colors that you will need, and they also are available to purchase singularly. And in the beginning I had a set of like a few colors, and I ended up not using most of those colors because I usually have like a really particular colors that I use. So I ended up using those for my mock-ups, and actual garments I just go and singularly buy each time I have a fabric. This way I don't waste my money on like sets, half of which I'm not even going to use. And the reason why it's polyester is because for sewing machines and like for your garments, you really do need the strength of polyester. So don't go out try to buy like cotton or anything, like unless it's a specific situation where you can use it. But for your generic purposes, polyester is what you need. But good news is Gutterman also has a recycled polyester threads, which I tried and it worked perfectly. So you can go for those if you want a more sustainable option. So the next essential is an iron and an ironing board, without which you can't really sew in my opinion, and you need to press as you go if you want to have a good result, and in general like you need to iron your fabric before you cut it out, so it's absolutely essential. But if you want to start out with a budget-friendly one, I started out with a mini travel iron. They're really cheap and they're really sweet, and IKEA also has like mini ironing boards that are really useful and compact. You can hang them on a hanger when you're done with them, and that's very budget friendly. And at some point, if you would like to like opt for a full-size iron, make sure that it has steam, because steam is very important when you're sewing. And if you have a mini iron, you can use a spray bottle that sprays without spitting, sprays a cloud, like a mist sort of, and this way you can actually use it while sewing. And I know that mini irons tend to spit water, so that's why you can opt for a bottle, but I did use it for like a year or so, and until I switched to a bigger iron that I got from a family member, so I didn't have to pay for it, and a bigger ironing board. But it was absolutely great for sewing in the beginning. It was only a problem when I started like using really long fabrics to make dresses and stuff, and with the tiny iron it takes a lot of time to finish ironing that. So another essential is having extra machine needles in various sizes. Like mine has from thin to thick, different sizes in it. These are universal ones, and I use them every time I change my project. Every time I'm starting a new project, I change my needle, unless I've really made something super quick, of course. And another thing is having extra bobbins for the, the bottom thread, because these run out so fast. So what I do is I fill like 3-4 of these, and I keep them on my desk so that I don't have to like unthread and rethread my machine so that I can fill the bobbin every single time it runs out, which is absolutely ridiculous. So you need to have extra ones that you fill out and keep with you so that when you're sewing in the middle of your project, you can just quickly switch. So these are all the essential items that I could think of, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If I forgot anything, let me know in the comments down below, and I hope that you learned something. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and see you in the next one. Bye!